Chapter 15, Will and the Pirate. Will was rudely awakened by a boot to the ribs. His head hurt, and he was in no mood to be kicked. So, when the boot came forward for the second time, he rolled into the kick, catching the boot before the power point of the strike reached him. He wrapped his arms around the legs and continued to roll, taking the man off his feet and sitting him down hard and fast on his buttocks. Will rolled over on top of the man and put an elbow strike where it would do the most damage, and when the man's head came up, he back-fisted him hard in the face. Will jumped to his feet, which he immediately regretted. His vision swam and his head pounded. He quickly sat down on the wooden deck. He had no idea where he was, but knew from the movement of the wood beneath him that he was on board a ship. Things began to come back to him, and he immediately wondered where Mei Li was. He remembered the explosion and blacking out and wondered how long he'd been unconscious. He looked at the boots and then over at the man wearing them. He was a young man, approximately Will's own age, but not well fed, and his clothes were not much better than rags. A bleeding, filthy pirate, Will thought. Boots, as he named him in his mind, began to wake up and moan. Boots was a rail of a man. Thin would have been an understatement, and he had a cruel, stupid look that Will didn't like. Will reached down and grabbed one of his fingers and bent it back far enough to cause pain, and Boots let out a squeal like a pig. "What vessel is this?" Will asked. The question was never answered as two blades were touched to Will's back, causing goose flesh to rise his spine. A sharp command told him to move away from Boots, and he very slowly did so, thinking it wise since he had no desire to be cut. He turned to face two men holding short swords who looked not much better fed or much brighter than their friend Boots, who was still laying on the deck holding his privates and moaning. "Look here," said the larger of the two with blades pointing at him. "The captain would be having words with you. Come along and no more mischief, see." Will allowed himself to be escorted, even though he knew he could easily disarm these two. He also knew he could not take on an entire ship of pirates by himself, and then thought of Mei Li and wondered again what had become of her. While he was being escorted to the captain, Will took notice of unanswered repairs from the previous night's battle. He was roughly pushed into a small cabin, and the first thing he took notice of was Mei Li hanging in a net from a hook like a load of fish, still very much alive, and marvel upon marvels, his trunk full of tools beside her. Mei Li looked at Will and said in Chinese, "These men are scoundrels and thieves, don't trust them," which prompted the man behind a small desk to place a blade at her ribs. "Be quiet," said the pirate. "I'm not going to harm your master." He used the sword to point to a stool and said, "Sit, have some wine with me, Will." At the mention of his name, Will looked up at his host again. He thought the pirate must have seen the ship's documents to know his name, but got a funny feeling about the way the man said it. "Sorry about your boy here, but it was the only way to take him alive. He would not leave your side and killed 4 of my best men with that damned bamboo thing. I don't normally kill unless those who resist require us to. You will find most of the crew of your vessel alive and well and still aboard their ship, although I am now in command." The door opened and light shone on the captain's face. A man entered with a plate of bread and cheese and quickly departed. Will, upon seeing the face in the light, was puzzled and said, "Don't I know you? You have a familiar look." Will couldn't remember his name or from where he knew him. The pirate laughed. "I wondered how long it would take till you recognized me, Will." Something about the tone of his voice and the way he said his name brought back a childhood memory. A scuffle in the street with the chandler's second son, Bastian. "Bass," said Will in astonishment. "You old son of a sea dog, what the devil are you doing in this part of the world?" The man laughed, stood up and came around the desk and hugged Will like a long-lost brother. Captain Bastian Jessel Cordell stepped back and looked at Will. "I could certainly ask you the same thing of you, Will, my lad. Last time I saw you, you were dancing out in a cow pasture with some Chinese lady." He stopped dead, his eyes turned, and he walked forward to take a closer look at Mei Li, and he said, "Blimey, mate." He took his sword, reached over, and cut the line holding the net, and Mei Li slid to her feet. Bai stood, bowed, and said, "I am very sorry, madam, for your rough treatment, but it never dawned on me." Base yelled for more wine and Will. Base and Mei Li set about sharing stories about what brought them to this moment. Base said, "As you know, I was the second son, so when me dad died, the chandlery went to me older brother Winston. You know, he and I never got along even when we were kids. So less than a fortnight after me poor father died, he put me out. Me mum had gone the winter before, and it took the heart out of me old dad. I had no choice. I went to sea. A year out, our ship was taken by Captain Two, and when I was offered at the point of a sword, I went pirate. You remember all them swashbuckling stories we heard when we were kids? Pirates were our heroes back then. 6 months ago, we took this ship, and to my surprise, Two put me in command, and I haven't seen him since. The time of pirates is coming to an end. There are more heavily armed man-o-war ships chasing us every day. I don't wish to swing, so I run. We were running into this harbor because of the reef where the man-o-war couldn't follow when we saw your ship. I thought it was a trap and felt I had no alternative except to attack. We have taken no ships since I took command, too busy running, and my men are hungry and ready to mutiny. The man-o-war is waiting just outside the harbor for us now. Why not surrender and explain that you are not a pirate but a captive? Will asked. They give us no chance to surrender. They open fire as soon as they see us, so we run. Will and Base talked for several hours. Will said, "Where is the ship we were on when you attacked, and what of the crew?" As I said, it is still in the harbor, and all are still aboard with my men guarding them with orders to harm no one unless absolutely necessary. I am sorry about the captain, Will. He was hit by the first volley and was killed. There were a few wounds here and there, but most surrendered when the captain died. Normally, the crew would be offered a place on our ship if they choose, and the rest would be dropped off near a settlement. We kill no one. Of course, my men will take whatever gold or silver they have in the ship, but we don't ransom or kill. You'll keep the ship? She wasn't damaged too heavily and will sail? Will asked. No, only the mizzen mast is broken. We can take down those sheets, and she will still sail with the 2 remaining masts, said Bass. Will sat silent and pondered a few moments and then said, You said the men were about ready to mutiny, right? Maybe we should let them. You must make it seem to be their own idea to take your ship and leave you behind. Send me aboard the Queen's Trumpet to start repairs, and I will talk to the captive crew and tell them our plan so they will cooperate. They will not let me go unless they have some way to escape the man-o-war, Base said. We'll give them as good a chance as possible. I will build some small boats and make some fire ships. Tonight, after dark, we will row quietly in close to the man-of-war and set the fireboats ablaze. While the crew of the man-o-war is busy fighting the fire, the boats will cause your pirate mates will have a chance to slip by. Once the crew puts the fire out and sees they are not really harmed by the fireboats, they will pursue, leaving us to slip away to open sea and back to England. Yes, but if I return home, they will be hanging me sure enough. Base said, I have some influential friends and will help you avoid that unpleasant prospect, especially since leaving the employ of Captain Two and you have not fired on another ship. Will was soon aboard with his tools and chest and had his team of carpenters hard at work removing the broken mast and getting the ship rigged to sail on the tide. The first officer, who was not all that bright, and the other captives were perfectly willing to help as they believed their lives at stake, a notion Will did nothing to dispute. Also put to work was a team of pirates with instructions to make 2 makeshift fireboats more like rafts. The rafts were then loaded with as much combustible material as possible, including a keg of rum and a fused keg of powder for each boat. By midnight, all was ready, and the pirates who wished themselves would get rid of Base readily agreed to the plan. Base was to take command of the captive ship, the Queen's Trumpet, and follow the pirates to the Tortugas, where Base told them they would sell the boat and the captives as slaves. The pirates secretly planned to include Bass in the sale. Luck was with them. It was a dark, cloudy night, no moon to give them away. A proper fresh wind that would fill the sails was blowing white caps on the waters of the bay. Will waited until well after midnight and then had Base's men row the fireboats out. Once they were in position, the pirate ship followed. When they were almost even with the man-o-war, the pirates set light to fuse of the powder keg on the fireboat. They went over the side and swam back to their ship. All worked as planned, and soon there was chaos on the man-o-war. Flames from the rum barrels were blown onto their decks by the powder charge when it exploded. It took the man-o-war several minutes to bring the fire under control and set sail. by which time the pirates were several miles outside the bay. The man-o'-war was soon in hot pursuit, and Will, Base, and the captives were left a free passage. The British naval ship had no idea there was a second vessel already in the harbor. Soon they were well out to sea and away from the battle. Base and Will stood on the deck drinking a toast and laughing. They charted a course for Britain and home. However, little did they know as they sailed for the Keys of Florida, there was a hurricane bearing down on the islands and they were sailing right into it.